You're looking live at Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Although in our camera view here you're seeing a little bit of shake from the breezy weather conditions, we understand that the weather is go for tonight's launch and proceeding with the countdown, loading liquid oxygen and rocket-grade kerosene aboard the first stage of the rocket. You can really see those vapors building up around the first stage of the rocket now. That isn't actually venting from the rocket. Those vapors are caused by the humidity in the atmosphere hitting the cold surface of the rocket's tanks. Visibility is very good this evening at Cape Canaveral, and we're getting an excellent view of those vapors building up around the first stage of the rocket.
Pogo.
So we're coming up on the point where the first stage tanks will be uh, filling filling up, and we'll be moving on to the second stage. And part of that process, we'll see the so-called big vent as propellant is flowed through the strung back that you see up against the right side of the rocket. And we'll see the plume of vapors, which are, I think you can just make out just starting now, that indicate the chill down of those lines in the strung back is now underway. Again, this is part of the process to get ready to start the loading of propellants aboard the second stage of the Falcon 9.
And stage 2 LOX load has begun. .
Good evening. You're looking live at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where liftoff of a Falcon 9 rocket is currently just about 15 minutes away, a little less than 15 minutes now, on the Starlink 435 mission. This mission, again designated Starlink 4-35, is set to launch 52 Starlink internet satellites. This will be the fourth Falcon 9 launch of the month, actually, all dedicated primarily to the Starlink network. A couple of those did carry rideshare payloads. And this will be the 43rd SpaceX Falcon 9 launch of the year. And about 2/3 of those missions have been primarily dedicated to the Starlink program. So you can see the Starlink network, if you haven't been keeping up, is indeed taking the lion's share of the Falcon 9 launch manifest so far this year. 52 more satellites set to launch in less than 14 minutes time from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now, actually reporting on this mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base, where we just saw a Delta IV Heavy rocket lift off with a classified payload for the National Reconnaissance Office less than an hour ago. And now on the opposite coast, we're monitoring the launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket with assistance from Stephen Young there at the Kennedy Space Center with the camera work. Again, looking live at Space Launch Complex 40, propellant loading on the Falcon 9 rocket began T-minus 35 minutes. And at this point, the Falcon 9's second stage is fully loaded with kerosene fuel. The second stage liquid oxygen loading began about 4 minutes ago. And both propellants, kerosene and liquid oxygen, continue flowing into stage 1 of the Falcon 9 on pad 40. This booster on this mission tonight is known as tail number booster 1073. This booster 1073 is making its fourth trip to space. It debuted back on May the 14th with a Starlink mission. It launched again on June the 29th with the SES-22 TV broadcasting satellite. And then it launched again last month on August the 9th with another batch of Starlink satellites. And its fourth flight is set for tonight, heading to orbit with 52 more Starlink payloads. If you're just joining us and you haven't had a chance to do so, please hit that like button on our YouTube stream. It helps us gain a bigger audience for our coverage. So if you haven't done so yet, please hit the like button. You can also join our YouTube channel. You can become a member. We have different tiers of membership available for you to choose from. And depending on which level you select, you can gain access to bonus video features for members only from our coverage of launches in Florida and elsewhere around the world. Again, we were out at Vandenberg Space Force Base today covering the Delta IV Heavy launch, the final Delta IV launch from the West Coast. 2 more Delta IV rockets in ULA's inventory still to fly from Cape Canaveral. Now approaching T-minus 10 minutes until launch. Now approaching 9 minutes until tonight's instantaneous launch opportunity, which is set for 7:32 p.m. in 10 seconds, 7:32:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That is 23:32:10 UTC. That's the exact launch time this evening. I want to give a big shout out to Artemis for their donation in the super chat. Big thanks for your support. After liftoff, the Falcon 9 will be heading northeast from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Again, this launch is occurring just after sunset on Florida Space Coast this evening. A Saturday night rocket launch from Cape Canaveral, now less than 9 minutes away. So the Falcon 9 will be heading northeast after liftoff from Pad 40 this evening. It'll be climbing into the upper atmosphere, heading over the Atlantic Ocean. And then the ground track this evening, we don't have a map for you, unfortunately, tonight, but the ground track this evening will take the Falcon 9 to the northeast, flying roughly parallel to the east coast of the United States, a very familiar flight path if you've watched our coverage from previous Starlink launches. And the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, is located about 400 miles downrange. That's one of 3 landing platforms, offshore landing platforms in SpaceX's inventory or fleet of maritime vessels. Again, the drone ship tonight is a shortfall of gravitas, parked about 400 miles downrange to the northeast from Cape Canaveral. That's roughly due east of Charleston, South Carolina. The countdown clock is approaching T-minus 7 minutes. At T-minus 7 minutes, we expect to hear the call that engine chill down is underway.
Engine chill has started.
There's the call. Engine chill has started. So engine chill down underway. This is a customary part of most rocket countdowns, at least rockets that are using cryogenic propellant. This is necessary to thermally condition the engine pumps and inlets and other hardware for the rapid flow of liquid oxygen when those engines get the ignition command. And this involves flowing just a little bit of that liquid oxygen chilled several hundred degrees below zero through some of the plumbing in the engine compartment to condition those elements for flight. We just heard also that the fuel load is complete on stage 1. So Falcon 9 has been fully fueled with rocket grade kerosene. This is known as Rocket Propellant 1, RP1. It's a highly refined kerosene that's burned by the Merlin engines on the Falcon 9 rocket. Now inside of 6 minutes until liftoff. Countdown is now inside of T-minus 5 minutes for the next milestones.
Strong back retract.
We're listening to periodic calls from SpaceX's launch control team. They just talked about strong back retract. That's the next big milestone in the countdown. That'll be coming up in just a few seconds. The strong back is the structure to the right of the Falcon 9 rocket in this view. It'll be retracting to an angle of about 1.5 to 1.8 degrees away from the Falcon 9. And we're hearing now that the strong back is retracting. This begins with the opening of clamps near the top of the strong back that actually wrap around the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. And then that strong back reclines to an angle again of about 1.5 to 1.8 degrees. At liftoff, that strong back mast will do a further retraction, a more rapid retraction, to clear the way for the Falcon 9 to begin its climb off the pad. Now inside of T-minus 4 minutes. Again, if you're just joining us, if you haven't hit the like button on our YouTube stream, we do invite you to do so now. That helps us gain as many people watching our coverage as possible before liftoff. Everything looking good for the 43rd SpaceX launch of 2022, less than 3.5 minutes away.
Stage 1 LOX load complete. Stage 2 LOX throttle back. Stage 2 LOX load complete. Alright, gas closeouts. Falcon 9 is in startup.
Now inside of 60 seconds until launch, we heard those calls a few moments ago that the liquid oxygen load has been completed on board the Falcon 9. There's the call from the launch director that he's go for launch. Propellant tanks are now pressurizing for flight. Vent valves are closing to bring those kerosene and liquid oxygen tanks on both stages up to flight pressure inside of 30 seconds.
Fifteen seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff of Starlink 435. Go Falcon 9.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket with 52 more Starlink internet satellites heading to orbit tonight from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Let's listen to the Merlin engines as they do their work,
chamber pressures
power
are
this
nominal.
Falcon 9 off the pad on the Starlink 435 mission.
Power into telemetry nominal.
Great view here of Falcon 9 darting in and out of clouds over the Space Coast. Heading northeast from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Falcon 9 is now supersonic. It's past Mach 1. Everything looking good. A little more than a minute into the flight.
Max Q.
Beautiful shots of Falcon 9 climbing into a twilight sky, getting some sun now as it rockets into the upper atmosphere. It should be a great show for those of you able to watch in person. Passing 2 minutes, a little more than 2 minutes into the flight, the next major milestones will be main engine cutoff of the first stage engines, followed by stage separation, and then ignition of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine, and then